Greetings, this is Mrs. Morford here. I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the slides that we went through in class. We started our unit on populations, and this unit goes directly into then ecology human impact. Once we're finished with ecology human impact, we're finished with ecology units, and we'll move into cells. So it's important that we understand populations before we go into human impact because a lot of it is directly correlated. So the vocabulary words that you'll need to know in this unit are these ones here. I'll post a Quizlet to the out of classwork and in the Google Classroom by the end of the day on Monday. We'll be talking about immigration and emigration, the differences there, exponential logistic growth, carrying capacity. We'll be talking about limiting factors, demography, and then demographic transition. By the end of the unit, we'll be able to understand how ecologists describe a population using characteristics. We'll be able to describe and recognize exponential and logistic growth. We'll be able to identify factors that affect population growth and determine carrying capacity. And we'll be able to identify the limiting factors that we talked about on the previous slide. In addition to those things, we'll be able to discuss, like an ecologist, human population growth, as well as explain growth rates. So when ecologists are talking about populations, they use these 5 things to explain how the population is set up. They use geographic range, density, distribution, growth rate, and age structure. So there was a farmer in Florida who had some hydrilla plants, which are not native to Florida. They're from Asia originally, and they reproduce very quickly. Today, the hydrilla plant can be found all across Florida and in some other states too. Because hydrilla grows so quickly, it kills other plants and animals around, and the introduced species has taken over and threatened the ecosystem in Florida and in other states. The point here is that the geographic range has changed, the distribution has changed, the density has changed, the growth rate is affected. The only thing that's missing in this example is age structure. So what is geographic range, you might be asking? Well, population's geographic range describes the place or the space that the population is found. One question that I have for you is, do you think that population geographic range is estimated or is it calculated? Well, it's both. So an estimation would be appropriate when we're talking about how many fish are in the ocean or how many grasshoppers are in a cornfield. But when we're talking about calculated populations, that's when we want to know more specifically exactly how many people. So an example of that would be the United States Census. If you're not familiar with it, Google it. But a short description is that the United States government sends out a survey every 10 years. And it's every 10 years because it's such an intense method. They send a letter to each household in America, and then the citizens are responsible for filling that survey out and sending it back. This will tell the government how the resources are in that area. So for example, in Sioux Falls, say that the area around Washington has bloomed and there's so many more people than they thought that was going to be. Well, they need to make sure that we have the resources available. It's information that the schools can use to make sure that they have enough schools and enough teachers, and it's information that the Department of Social Services can use when they're looking at how many people are affected maybe financially and they need help with Medicaid or Medicare or food stamps, anything like that. So it's super important. So when we estimate populations, we use what's called a sampling technique. And the sampling technique is where we, instead of counting every single grasshopper in a cornfield, you mark off maybe a 10 by 10 square or a 2 by 2 square, and you count all of the grasshoppers that are there, mark them somehow, usually with like a marker, or sometimes like eagles get serialized, and there's a thing that gets attached to their foot. Anyway, so after the grasshoppers have been marked, the next day you come back and you do the same thing. You count how many grasshoppers are in that square, and you count the ones that have already been captured, and then you mark the new ones. And then you go back and you go back and you go back. And after a series of days, then you can estimate how many, based on the square feet or square mile or acre, how many grasshoppers would be there. Okay, so density and distribution. We talked a little bit about this in class. Density is the number of individuals per square unit area or per unit area. And then distribution is how they're spread out throughout the unit area. So there's 3 different ways that populations can be distributed. They can be clumped, uniform, or random. You'll notice that in clumped, it's clumped. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 over here and 3 over here. In uniform, it's exactly 3 by 3. And then random, there's absolutely no order. It's just totally random. All right, so then we talked about growth rate a little bit. Growth rate of a population tells us if the population is getting too big, if it's getting smaller, or if it's staying the same. If we have a negative number, that means that the population is declining. If we have a positive number, it means that it's either growing, or if the number is staying the same and it's positive, it means that it is staying the same. So this graph over here on the left is showing like the J shape or a hook. This is what exponential growth would look like on a graph, because we can tell that from years 6 to 7, it was okay. 7 to 8, it was significantly higher. 8 to 10, and then, 8 to 9, and then 9 to 10. So every year, it just continued to grow and grow and grow. The graph on the right is showing that it's pretty consistent spacing through each of the line segments, which shows us a steady increase. It's not exponential, it's just a steady linear growth. All right, last thing is that we talked about age structure. So these 4 graphs will show us the age structure of a population. And age structure is important because ecologists need to know where the reproducing age is. And my assumption is that based on this picture, the yellow is probably what they're looking at for the reproduction age. So we'll go over this when you come back to class, but this just gives you an idea of what we did, and continue to log in when you're out of class. And if you have any questions, as always, just email or text. Thank you.